Change is around us every day. So, how do you manage the changes that happen in mining year round? Welcome to another episode of Change Itself, hosted by Gus Miner and Eric Demers. This show is brought to you by Sophie and Technica Mining and is produced by Crownsman Partners. Now, here are your hosts, Gus and Eric.
All right, good day, everyone. Here we are again with episode 14 of Change Itself. 14 already. Quick reminder for everyone: if you like to get more notifications and follow us, you can take a look at our YouTube channel at changeitself.com. Also, join us at Change Itself on LinkedIn, and we post a lot of great stuff, and we look forward to your feedback and having you following along. And for everyone that's joining us again, thanks for continuing to watch our episodes and our conversations as we explore things. Today we've got a great episode joined here with Eric Demers and Tyler Chisholm. Tyler Chisholm from Clearmotive, where we're going to be diving into the conversation around internal marketing and internal sales. Right, every time we do a change in an organization, we create a lot of conversation and a lot of initiatives based on external stakeholders or external initiatives, so that everybody understands what we're doing, why we're doing it, and why everybody should care. And it's going to be a great conversation, right, Eric, to see what kind of tools and tricks and tips we can use internally.
Yeah, I'm excited. I mean, a lot of the work that I'm involved with is actual internal marketing, or requires internal marketing. And I've been trying to follow marketing to educate myself a little bit. So I'm excited to hear what Tyler's got to say and what we can take away.
Right on. So welcome aboard, Tyler, our marketing guru for today, right?
Thank you, gentlemen. I don't know about the word guru, but I'm happy to be here, and thanks for having me on.
Right on. So so we've been following you along. I mean, a lot of great things going on at Clearmotive, and a lot of change with your team as well. So maybe we can start diving into it. So when it comes to when you have conversations with your clients and you start putting initiatives in place for for the most part, people understand marketing as a good way to have the public and the broad audience aware of the brand and aware of what's going on, so that they can gain more traction at the regional, national, or global scale. Mm-hmm. What's it been like for you as far as the internal initiatives and how to communicate with internal stakeholders for all this change?
For us, it's something that's evolved over the years. And certainly if I had a whiteboard here, I would do my little diagram where, you can put your brand in the center, and your first concentric ring is your internal team. Then it's often your vendors and your partners. Then it's your customers. And then it's the people that know you and don't use you. And then it's the infamous outside ring, which is that group that doesn't know you and doesn't use you. And so often, or buy from you, depending on whether it's a product or a service. And so often that's what we chase. And you talked about whether it's exposure locally, nationally, globally. There's that elusive, but it's the hardest, most expensive group to get to. And we often trip over that inner group. And that is relevant to the size of the organization, I think, as well. If you're dealing with a startup, kind of an all hands on deck, everybody's contributing, like everyone's around the table, I find that is your main group. It's your internal team, and that's who's really collaborating around your story. But as soon as your company starts to grow, and it doesn't have to be much, it can be 20 to 30 people, that really starts to break apart. And as it grows up the chain, I think that continues. And often it's, well, whose initiative is that internal? Is it HR? Is it the IT group, because they're the ones building the back end for people to communicate? Is it the responsibility? Does it happen during onboarding? So it's been an interesting, and it's beyond employer brand, which I think is another conversation we can have today. Like, there's your outward facing brand, and is our product and our offering a fit for our customer base? Then there's your employer brand, which is typically, statistically can reduce your costs of new employee acquisition. And I would argue today that's almost a make or break, as the talent wars that we all live in. Then there's the just getting buy-in and, launching a new campaign and forgetting to even tell your internal team you're doing it, where they often can be your strongest source of referral or reference. And it really depends up and down the board, but you've got to consider all of them, because they're a stakeholder group that you also happen to know the most about, but sometimes neglect. So it's a real kind of dichotomy when you think about, them and you have access to them, but yet you forget to communicate with them. And I think it's a missed opportunity for a lot of organizations.
Yeah, you talked about like tripping over that inner circle, and I think about a lot of the initiatives I've taken on, and sometimes you don't even consider it. You're already like, even though it's for them, you're not even communicating to them. You've completely missed them or forgotten them. So,
and they tend to take that personally, don't they, Eric?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, so do we when it happens to us, right?
Yes, it does.
Any tips or ideas, or where do we start planning and mapping that out?
Well, let's start with how let's put on our marketing hats. Like we commented earlier, what's the key to any type of new initiative? And I've been having a lot of conversation with entrepreneurs recently, and the mistake of falling in love with your version of your customer's problem versus actually falling in love with their problem. So I think that's the first step when you're looking at understanding, like rolling something out. And there's twofold. Is it an internal initiative that is for them, or it's just something they're going to be taking part in? And I think understanding and really taking the time to kind of fall in love with their perspective of like, you ever landed a big client and the leadership team is really excited, but the team goes, oh God, this is just going to be more work. Like, oh, this is just going to be harder. Like you didn't invest in the fact that like maybe financially this is a win for the organization, but an overworked or maybe a team that doesn't feel they had the right resources before now feels more overwhelmed. So really stepping back and looking at almost like that service blueprint and like, okay, let's say we're selling a new product or a new offering, or we landed a new client with an offering that we already have, understanding the impact that's going to have on your internal team. So you can communicate with them how maybe those things that went wrong before won't, or the things that are really going to be an uplift for the company. Like we get to work in a new environment that we've never worked in before. It's great for our growth. Maybe it's great for your career advancement. Maybe there's actually going to be some new roles, some promotions, some opportunities, some upskilling, forgetting to like, oh geez, the afterthought of we now sold this new piece of work and we actually don't have the skills for it. Oh, how fast can we run and get you skilled up versus actually positioning it as an opportunity for career growth? Like it's all about understanding that value proposition and falling in love with their perspective, maybe not just management's perspective of a win when it comes to maybe just gaining new business, to think of it that way.
Yeah, I mean, you cover something super important there. Like, we always talk about what's in it for me. Like, like every time you think about, I want to engage a person or persons to do, they're going to try to find their own personal win. And something that really, really landed with me just now with what you spoke about is normally we get a big contract or we get a new gig or whatever. And then we do have promotions that occur instantaneously because you have no choice but to mold around the demand. But then with no real strategy or plan around it, it's more like, hey, guess what? Yesterday your hat was this. Today your hat is this. Kudos, and you move forward. But then what is the development strategy? What is the enrollment strategy? How do they become your advocates at that point? And how do they become the leaders that you want them to be, other than just occupying the space on the org chart to keep the initiative moving forward? I mean, that one hit me really hard because I think we've all experienced that over the years. That we call it fluidity or we call it agile. I mean, I know with being part of startups, I mean, we call it being agile, where we just kind of move hats around and make things work. But there's definitely something to be said there about communicating what that means at the high level and what you're going to be able to offer to them for their success and for them to succeed in return and things like that. Right.
So is there a tool or strategy, Tyler, that you use to do that? Like one of the things that's coming to mind is like crafting one that we use is we craft a leadership message. And it's one that I'd kind of dusted off the shelf last week to try on because I hadn't done it in a while. But you talk about like landing a big project, and I just got off the phone prior to this with someone that was excited about this new project, and it landed for me like, okay, like we have all these things to do and it's like do in a month. Like, how are we going to achieve that? But, like, and I'm sure I do that all the time to people. So hearing it's like, oh man, right. And getting to experience that. But what type of tool or strategy would you have to like, take a few seconds before delivering that message so that it lands the right way?
I appreciate the question of, a specific thing or a specific tactic. I'm a big believer in kind of that ongoing coaching model. Like maybe it's formal, but slightly informal, having a lot of transparency around kind of top down organizational. Here's where we're headed. Here's what we're doing. And to Gus's point, here's how it's going to affect you. For example, at Clearmotive, we used John Doerr's OKR model. And the whole point of the OKR model is you set very opportunities and key results. You set very kind of top level, almost not measurable, but these are our top 5 objectives for the year. We want it better here, better there. Then you basically layer it down to understand at the individual level. If one of our initiatives have an always on marketing communications program, let's just pick that as something. At the senior level, there's a level of key accountabilities on a monthly basis. But then now what we've started to do, we ran this for about a year without bringing it to the rest of the team. Now we are fully transparent. So they can also have the opportunity to put up their hand and say, I want to get involved. But if they don't, they're going to be less surprised when they hear about something like, oh, wow, I didn't even know we were going to market with this huge content strategy versus I'd really like to contribute to that. I've always kind of wanted to write a blog article. How can I participate? And we're getting really tactical, but it allows to take that higher level company objective or even sales. Like, this is what's in the funnel. This is what we're working on. And it might have nothing to do with them until the second you land that deal. And when you're using a coaching model, like what we'll do is we'll roll it out and we'll present it from a leadership perspective, top down. But then our individual managers, while they're in their coaching sessions with their team, hey, talk to me about the KRs, the key results that we showed for this quarter. Any resonated with you? Any you're interested about? Any you were curious about? We also send an open survey after we present that to go, was there anything that was unclear? Because not everybody wants to put their hand up in the all team or in the town hall. So we really try to create an open dialogue of like transparency, almost ad nauseum, if you will, because we didn't do that in the past, and it was landmine after landmine after landmine. And it's easy to say, but the OKR model for us was very easy because as a leadership team, it wasn't extra work. We were already doing it. We just now did it in a way that we could be fully transparent with everybody. And hopefully they can see their own reflection in what we're focusing on. And it's limited a lot of the, I don't feel like I know, so therefore it makes me uncomfortable mindsets.
Every worker deserves to go home safely at the end of the day. Book a demo with Sophie to discover how their groundbreaking EHS management software empowers workers to proactively avoid hazards and how organizations like yours can cultivate a stronger work culture. Visit them at sophie.com to learn more. Technica Mining is a premier underground mining and construction contractor. They stand for delivering quality project work on time and on budget through innovative thinking. Their excellent safety record, experienced workforce, and large equipment fleet will guarantee the timely completion of all your project needs. Trusted by the world's leading mining companies, Technica Mining has over 20 years of experience in mine construction, development, and production. Contact Technica Mining to take your next mining project to the next level. Visit them at technicamining.com. Change Itself is produced by Crownsman, the voice of industry. Check out more, including The Crownsman Show, Mining Now, The Building Energy Show, and Agriculture Now at crownsman.com.
You're talking about like your people are aware that they can be involved or not. And like after getting off the phone and getting to like digest it, and as you're talking, like the opportunities that I see are coming up. But when you get like the piece around maybe not the lack of transparency, or you don't know about something, that surprise piece right away, the defense mechanisms come up. So I could totally appreciate how
Yes,
the model like OKR would then allow for the transparency for people to know what's coming and how they fit in and what they want to engage in. So I like that. Thanks.
And how it also ladders into where the company is headed from an employer brand. Like if you're running a big marketing campaign and one of your teams sees it in market and they're surprised. Again, I like the thing about we're kind of catching on the surprise. Anytime I'm surprised, and like unless maybe it's my birthday party or you want to give me a new car or something, it's probably going to be like, well, wait a second, how does this affect me? And there's a slight defensiveness because we live in a world with so much rapid change. How do we make people feel safe? And an employer brand where you allow that to happen through transparency, but also inclusion, not just letting them see, but seeing how they can lean into it. To me, that's a huge, like, how do you create a safe place for people to then put up their hand, or at least if they decide not to, they don't get kind of quote unquote blindsided and feel like they're now disconnected from the culture or disconnected from what's going on at the employer kind of leadership or brand level.
So Tyler, do you also leverage like internal campaigns? Like, because all I can visualize all the time is that, an employee goes to the supermarket and sees a flyer for the business that they're part of, and they have no idea that this stuff is happening. And they're like, I work there and I don't even know. So like, that's the only thing I keep visualizing when it comes to So like, would you recommend as another tool is to say, like, do you have strategies as far as here's your campaign and your go-to-market strategy for external stakeholders, and here's your campaign and go-to-market strategy for internal? And do you release your internal strategy first? How would that work out?
That's a fantastic question. There's a couple different ways to do it based on the size of the organization. Like one of our key flagship clients we've worked with for years is Honda Canada. And when we go to market, and they're very deadline driven, and it's very competitive space. So very rarely do they, like, lots of things are embargoed, or there's a certain product that's coming new to the Canadian market that can't be talked about. It's usually it's actually a code before it ever hits the light of day. So something like that, we might launch a public facing campaign the same day that we wrap all of the windows in the cafeteria cafeteria at Honda's office about a new side-by-side or a new ATV off-road vehicle product. That would be an example of kind of in sync. The other way to think about it is if you're a smaller organization, for example, job postings are such a great one. We share all of our job postings internally as an internal campaign. We're looking for this. Maybe there's a referral tied to it, a bonus for the staff. And we'll use platforms like we use Asana and we also use Slack. So a great internal company, a social intranet or some way to communicate with people that they're on a regular basis. So it doesn't have to be formal. And I think timing is important. Going to market for a job that maybe someone sees as actually a threat to their job. So that's something we always share that internally first. With a lot of companies that we work with, their internal audience, I think, has been forgotten about. So oftentimes we push it forward. They're not necessarily that invested in spending a significant dollar amount. So oftentimes we'll piggyback on a platform they already have. Like, is there a place where your employees go on a regular basis? And depending on the company, sometimes that's a Slack channel. Sometimes it's a project management tool. Other times it's a social intranet or an internal communications tool. We have done corporate videos. We have done internal rollouts. It really depends if the employee is the target audience or if they're just should be also informed. If that makes sense. Like we rolled out a Respect in the Workplace program for a large physiotherapy company. They were about what were they, 120 140 locations and kind of 1,600 employees. And we knew because they were very these were physiotherapists, so they'd come in, do their job, and they would leave. Some of them were contractors. There wasn't a set way for everybody to get communicated with. So knowing they were coming out with this Respect in the Workplace program 6 months prior, we helped them roll out a social intranet program. And we stopped delivering pay stubs. So this was a few years ago. This is probably 2014, 2015, to force quote unquote people to then access this digital tool to get their pay information so that when we had an information to share, we actually got, this was a company that not even every employee had an email address. So it was like that. So we had a lot of barriers. And I would imagine in your world where you've got a lot of people working in the field and people that they're not in front of their computers all day, like some of us, there's a harder way. So thinking about well in advance of a mechanism of how to communicate with those individuals. And so when it was time to roll out Respect in Workplace, which was a company-wide initiative, we had about, I think 58 or 59% of the company's employees were going to their social intranet platform at least twice a month. So we kind of knew where they were hanging out and then where we could get in front of them with an inward facing message. So that was definitely like, we had to plan for it, because if we waited to the day of like, we're going to go live, oh geez, our key audience group here, we have no way to get in front of them. We don't know where they're going to hang out or what content they're going to be consuming. So that was a bit of a longer tail, but an example of when the employee was the actual primary audience versus just an informed audience, we had to think about a different tactic because we didn't have a tool in place to communicate with them.
You know, because one of the things that I've been working on, and I've been working on that with my clients as well, is that for the sake of consistency, right, for the most part, because you want to make sure you're consistent message. Like we use Loom a lot, right?
Okay, yeah.
Like
Loom is a fantastic tool. I'm a big fan of it, actually.
Yeah, I mean, it's free. You get your message recorded. You get it. You get some FaceTime, and then once you pass on that message, or if it's part of your training sessions, or if it's part of whatever you're doing, that key leadership message follows through with just clicking that link and playing a video across the way. Then at least, you know, from a time management standpoint, I mean, the leadership is not having to be at each one of these sessions and meetings, but they are there because they're saying the same message over and over again. So we've been using Loom a lot for that. But to your point, I mean, you could be going somewhere where you're in a trailer at a construction site or a mine site or something like that. Yeah. And the internet might be there, might not be there. So video kind of goes away. So, you know, we kind of got to take a look at different strategies on how to bring that message along. But
the one thing I would touch on about that message, and if you think about it again, what lessons can we learn from big brands and their campaigns? You're never going to see pieces of content like, so if we launch a campaign for a new, we'll just stick on the Honda theme. We'll talk about a new side by side. Sometimes we might have 300 to 400 different digital assets that are all going out into market at the same time on all different channels all over the place. You will never see a message that doesn't fit because it was very well orchestrated and the value propositions of that product were clearly pulled through. Oftentimes I find with things like Loom or where you're doing more off the cuff, the message can shift and move. Like back to that discipline of like, what is our corporate message and what is our employer brand and what is who we stand for and what we're about. Always having that little set of cheat sheet or those notes kind of beside your computer or on your desk somewhere. So when you craft that message, because humans we're a bit sloppy. We move and we learn something new and we try a new line because we liked it or we saw it on a podcast we happened to listen to and now we want to go back and try it. But now all of a sudden, if Eric and Gus are both going, wow, we both watch different podcasts and we're both sending a message and I get this employee, I'm like, I maybe don't know that it's different, but it feels different to me. I don't call it out. So consistency is tough while still being human through the whole process.
Right.
Yeah, I could like vouch and see what you're talking about there. We're starting to get into it more and more where we have, we've always talked about our culture and how we use the acronym RICH squared: respect, integrity, courage, honesty, humility. And that's our core values. We talk about them a lot. And then we have a corporate declaration, we have a missions value statement, and we have these different pieces, and we're really starting to use them and communicate with them from an aligned perspective and how they like feed into one another, and crafting our messages and our internal brand stories that way, I found has been helpful in aligning kind of everybody's views, as opposed to just flat out, this is what we're doing. And without getting into the why and how it ties into who we are as an organization, it tends not to land the same way.
I couldn't agree with you more. How do you bring the values and the mission and the vision and all those corporate things off the wall into how you actually behave and communicate on a daily basis? And even, how quickly you rhyme that off and how like, you owned it and you understand it. How do you make it observable? How do you make someone go, oh yeah, no, I observed like integrity in the way they communicated with me, and those observable behaviors. And I heard something years ago about values that I really like your brand and your culture is what people talk about at the backyard barbecue. Oh, you work at Technica. Oh, cool. What's that like? What they say next, that's your brand. And how you've communicated with them that week, the words you use, the respect, the cadence, all the things, the inclusion. It's great. I love it. They keep me informed all the time. They pay well. And yeah, no, I'm about to upgrade my career. Like what they say next, that's actually your brand. And that's your message. That's going to be a direct derivative, not only from what they've heard you say, but how they've been treated. Because ultimately humans, we're tricky, but we're kind of not at the same time. If you treat me well, I'm probably going to tell the story in a positive way. If I feel somehow disrespected or not included, I might answer that question a little bit differently at the backyard barbecue.
We always look for those key markers, right? Where can we go collect that data? Where can we go collect those key markers that's going to help us understand how well we're doing and where we're going? So,
yes, I have the fly on the wall at the backyard barbecue with a whole bunch of, especially if it's technical employees and a competitor's employees happen to be at the same backyard barbecue, that's when you're really going to hear how well you're doing, which is almost impossible to gather that information. But I like it makes me think twice about it. I'm like, how would this show up at the backyard barbecue? Makes me pause on my statement before I push send on that email or that Slack message, or maybe that Loom video, to your point.
That's great. I mean, yeah. When we know with our work together over the years and with the different messages that we've brought together and now working on new one together again, I thought this was a great conversations to be had and see what kind of insights we can have, because, to your point, I think we do trip over that inner ring a lot. And it's not even by fault or by, is that we just assume, right? We just assume that our inner circle is tight and it's moving well, and we don't really have to spend much time on it, and we go forward. But it's becoming more and more apparent that there's just as much energy to put there on any new initiative than trying to communicate to the masses abroad, right?
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. And it's and not to use a terrible corporate, it's the low hanging fruit. They're already there. They're already invested. You probably have a way to communicate with them. They'll probably listen. Where that outside ring or that new audience, they are inundated. Like the chance of you to break through. That's why advertising or media driven advertising is so expensive, to get that eyes and get that moment where you've got someone internally that might be that advocate or that brand advocate. And something my business partner always says is like, your customers as well as your employees are going to talk about you. Make it easy for them by putting the right messages on their lips. Like make it easy to tell the technical story, the Sophie story, and then make them feel like they're part of it, because there's no better feeling than being proud of where you work and proud of being part of something. It's just a very fine line in a world where you can get embittered pretty quickly as well. Just being very respectful of we're humans. We're all a little bit messy. That's okay.
Right. And then there was a question in this particular that I wanted to bring today in this conversation was, I mean, we all know how SEO is really changing the game for online presence and searchability and accessibility. And how we can actually target. I mean, the online campaigns now, you can get very, very, very targeted, very specific.
I would use the word creepy, but in a positive way.
Yeah. I mean, it could have very, very positive intent and outcome,
yes,
but it can also get very dark. to your point. So one of the questions I had was, have you ever explored with anybody, targeted messaging, targeted campaigns, targeted social media interactions for, that outer circle, like we're talking about that outer ring, but also launching an online campaign that would target in a way that it would be in the face of your internal team while they are on social media? Like, has that ever come up in different campaigns, so that you can actually launch two digital campaigns that have different segmented audience, but depending on how granular you get on your segment, there's probably an opportunity there to, like you talked about medias of deliver, like, different mediums of delivering the message, whether it's an internal tool, but then, how do you bridge those external tools so that you can see the message just as efficiently through targeted marketing? Is that something that exists?
That's it. I'm sure. Absolutely. You to a certain extent answered your own question. If you were really clear about your audience group and you segmented it in a way that made sense, I would still argue that cost wise, it would still be cheaper to use an internal tool, like, build a tool before you need it, your Slack channel or your Asana or whatever tool, like pick the tool. There's a million of them. I'm sure there's a slide with 500 tools on it of way to communicate internally. Being respectful and understanding that if you're out there running a campaign, that your team will see it and your team will either resonate with it or be like, last thing you want them to be like, well, that's kind of bullshit. That's actually not what we do. Like, you want it to be truthful and you want it to have a sense of integrity. I would still argue that building the ability or building the channel to communicate internally before you need it for that example of a campaign is still more cost effective and still more targeted. I would think more of my external, and I'm trying to think of it. I don't think we've ever run a campaign where it was very specifically, we want to target our existing staff. It was more, if our existing staff see this, oftentimes it was an employer, like a recruitment campaign or something like that. We want to make sure nobody gets like, well, wait a second, are they recruiting for my role? Like, it was more trying to mitigate any risk or perception of fear. Like, wait a second, I'm a graphic designer. We don't seem that busy. What's going on here? Like that, back to Eric's point about, ooh, that surprise didn't feel good. I didn't like that.
Yeah,
but if that's,
at 9 o'clock on a Monday, perfect timing.
yeah. It's worse at 3 o'clock on a Friday because then you have all weekend to stew about it. So yeah. Friday afternoon is not a good time to launch a campaign if you're not 100% sure how it's gonna land, because you can't go and talk to you like, hey, I saw this ad. No, sorry, I didn't tell you. So for example, as a smaller organization, we just do that very organically. We send it out, we post it on Slack, we communicate with some of our team. If there's anybody that feels, I'm just using the job role because that's something that can induce fear, where it's like, no, we're growing, we've got this exciting opportunity. But if they already know we're about to land a new piece of business, then all of a sudden it's like, that makes sense. So I would argue that having everything exposed in a way that understanding that your team might read it, and that's okay. So put that filter on it when you're editing or when you're writing it from a message perspective. Still going to be more cost effective and more personalized to communicate with them internally. And unless it's some secretive go-to-market and you've got to land on the right day because your competitors, otherwise keep your team informed first. You're still like, you trip over them, but they're still your first audience. Think about them and don't be shy to even talk to them. They're going to have insights about your customer and about your delivery system that when it comes to change management or, digital transformation or any type of, we're going to do things differently. If they felt that they were involved and they could see their fingerprints on the campaign or on the white paper, or they were quoted, oh, that's an amazing morale booster. They feel part of it now. They feel included. They matter. And it's so simple. At the end of the day, we're still humans, and seeing that we got to take part and getting our fingerprints on something and then seeing it out there in market or seeing a billboard, let's go old school. Sometimes our first target for the old billboard days was the CEO driving in and seeing his own billboard and calling you and telling you how excited he was. There's your first win with your billboard when you're in the marketing business. Think about it that way. In digital, of course, I dated myself there, but sometimes driving by your own billboard on the side of the road still induces a sense of pride. Let's not underestimate that.
No, that's great. I mean, Eric, I don't know if you had anything else that any questions that were brewing there for Tyler.
Oh, I appreciated what you've shared with us, Tyler. I want to be conscious of time for sure. And there's nothing for me. And thanks for joining us and sharing with us. Really appreciate it.
My absolute pleasure. Hopefully it wasn't too philosophical, but it's one of those questions you can go pretty broad on it. And ultimately we're a bunch of humans,
philosophical, right? And we could go on for hours and hours and hours.
Yes, we can.
For sure.
Yeah. And the cool part is that, like, on each episode, we kind of try to touch on something that's innovative and kind of cutting edge on the innovation side, so we can share with the audience. But I think through this conversation we touched on so many different tools and platforms and ways that we can connect with our internal stakeholders that I think the audience will be able to take a lot of wins away from what we talked
That's
about.
awesome.
So
Thank you.
yeah, thanks again for joining in, Tyler. And
It was
look
my
forward to
pleasure.
our
And
continued
I'll leave it out there. If anybody wants to reach out to me, Tyler at clearmotive.ca. I love to chat about just about everything. So don't be shy. If someone's like, "Huh, what did you mean here? Or what platform did you reference?" Don't be shy. I just want to leave an open door to your audience to feel free to reach out. So Tyler at clearmotive.ca. You can email me anytime.
Yeah, and you can also get a hold of you on LinkedIn, right? You got a LinkedIn page for Clear.
I do. That is where I like to hang out. Is my favorite social media platform. I feel sometimes the other ones, do I feel that was good use of my time? But LinkedIn, I love it every time.
Awesome. No, I really appreciate it. Thanks a lot, guys.
My pleasure. Thank you, gentlemen.
All right.
Here we are for episode 14 in the books. Don't forget to like, subscribe, ring the bell, the whole 9 yards to keep up to date with the content we put out. And see you next time.